Hi, everyone. I'm James Garbutt.
And I'm Denny Dumas.
And this is the Garbutt Dumas Real Estate Podcast.
Last night, Jamie, I connected with some realtor partners around BC. And just to kind of get an update on what is happening in their market and how is that kind of differing or maybe potentially spilling over from Greater Vancouver. We've obviously chatted a lot about how the market shifted, interest rates climbing, of course, in the last 60 to 90 days in Greater Vancouver. We've seen a lot more supply. We've seen prices come down in a lot of neighborhoods. We've seen the activity drop. We've seen buyer anxiety come back to a more normal level where they don't feel like...
You deserve it, buyers.
Yeah. The FOMO is gone, it seems like, or has subsided. And it's interesting in chatting with realtors around BC that there is this natural spillover effect outside of Greater Vancouver. It seems like when Greater Vancouver has a really, really hot 3, 6, 12 months, the outskirts, the popular areas on the island and the interior, they are a few months behind us, but they do feel that big lift very shortly after, and it's almost very predictable. And it seems like this is no different, that we've seen a pretty big slowdown, 10 to 15% in a lot of neighborhoods. Prices have come off, and we maybe started seeing it 60 days ago, and a lot of these neighborhoods are starting to see it in the last 30, 45 days. So they're close, but lagging a little bit behind Greater Vancouver activity. Let's start with, let's maybe go east. So let's start with Langley. Chatted with Matt Ruff. He is a good friend and a really prominent realtor. And so we kind of chatted specifically about Langley. And the overall comments he was kind of making were the list price strategy has changed significantly. Last year, we were seeing prices listed $200K below what they were going to sell for in an effort to get 60 people through the door, get 15, 20 offers, and have leverage to push those prices as high as we can and set a record.
Let's be clear. Last year, a 999 list price meant 1.2, and a 1.2 list price meant 1.5. That was the math in Langley. That was the formula.
Totally. And it got to the point where buyers that had a 1.5 budget wouldn't even see something that was listed at 1.3 because they knew it was going to sell for 1.6 or 1.7.
So frustrating.
It was really frustrating. So one of his comments was just the strategy has changed, and now a lot of sellers are listing at or above market value. And he said there is significantly less sales in the last 30 days than there was a while ago. He mentioned that the inventory is roughly 3 times what it was 2 months ago for single family homes, but noted that
that's not surprising.
We're back totally.
Yeah.
But he noted that 3 times more inventory is just a normal level of inventory for the spring. It's not like inventory is building up like crazy. We're just getting back to a normal level of inventory.
To a normal market.
Totally. Yeah. Which is a really important point to make, I think, right?
Could you imagine that as a headline?
Yeah. The market is normal.
Yeah. Normal still is more skewed to sellers.
Yeah, totally. He said, in terms of sale prices, they've definitely seen them drop. It seems like, as we kind of just mentioned about Greater Vancouver, or let's say the Lower Mainland, our side of the river, that values or sellers that are in a bit of a tight situation, whether they've bought something already or whether, life changing or they're retiring and moving out of the city, that kind of feel this need to sell, they're chasing the market down a little bit. And so sale prices are quite a bit lower than they were 2 or 3 months ago. And then from a buyer perspective, he said he's feeling the exact same thing that we are, that buyers have this mentality now of let's wait and see what happens. And typically people that are in that mentality want to see a few months of stats. They want to see, the rate hike today. The Bank of Canada announced June 1st, another 0.5% increase. I think that's only going to, push these people to sit on the sidelines a little bit longer. And they probably will want to see a few months of sales data through the summer. Probably are going to see prices and sales volume come down again. So we'll see what happens. But Langley basically feeling very similar to Tri-Cities, New West, Burnaby, in that lot more inventory, sales volume down, and we've probably seen a 10 to 15% drop in single family housing prices.
I'm going to add some little stats that I pulled up because I happened to look up Walnut Grove prior to coming here. So just on Walnut Grove alone. So I like looking at the last 30 days of sales and sometimes last 60 days of sales because it's a changing market. But over the last 30 days in detached homes, single family homes, the 50% of the listings that sold were getting above asking. So there is still a prominence of bidding wars in the last 30 days. Now, keep in mind, that's coming off of like 80, 90% getting above asking. So it is, it is changing. Median days on market for a single family home was 7. Average sale price list price was 102% of the list. So that median, 102% of the list. And the median sale price for a detached home over there in the last 30 days was $1.55 million. And that gets you about, call it a 30-year-old home that's 2,400 square feet. I guess one obvious highlight was that, we're not going to get the most accurate data for the last 2 weeks because it's still fresh. But if I look at April 15th to May 15th, 2022 versus 2021, in 2022, there were 22 sales in Walnut Grove, and in 2021, there was 42 sales. So the number of sales, and that was kind of a pattern that I saw in a lot of markets where in some markets it was, half of what it sold, but it's approximately half. So overall, Walnut Grove is still more affordable than Burnaby, New West, North Shore, but it has cooled off a bit. And by cooled off, the average sale price to list price is 102%.
Yeah, I mean, that honestly is surprising to me.
It's changing though. Yeah. It's clearly trending below, but that's what it's been looking back.
Yeah. Just because I asked everyone about strata too, I just want to mention quickly about strata in Langley that he's seeing. So he specifically mentioned townhouses, and he said he's never seen this much inventory of 3-bedroom townhouses in Langley right now. And he said that very few sales in the last couple months, which is hurting single family houses, right? So a lot of the demographic in Langley is the upsizer that is selling a 3-bedroom townhouse trying to get into single family. And the consumer mindset has changed in that, 3 or 4 months ago, people were buying first and listing their place right away. And that has changed now that the 3-bedroom townhouse market has cooled off so much, in that there are a ton of listings, very few are selling, which means very few of these younger families that are trying to move up to single family are actually getting to do that this spring, summer.
Well, I imagine they saw some pretty high prices in February. And many of them don't want to realize the new price point after seeing those high prices in February.
Totally.
I mean, everyone's in a different situation.
And then the last thing I asked about each person was just like the demographic of who is the purchaser 3-4 months ago versus today, and has that changed? And in Langley, he said it seems like there are a lot less people moving east versus 2021. That was the huge pool of buyer demographic, was people moving from more expensive markets, selling condos or townhouses in Vancouver, New West, Burnaby, Tri-Cities, and moving to Langley for more space. And he said, so now the majority of their buyer pool right now is locals that are upsizing, moving laterally, downside.
You think 2023 might be the year where a lot of people get lonely and trend back towards the city?
Totally. I think that was like one of my points at the end, so we'll jump ahead to that.
I want to hear let's not jump. You talk to other people in different markets, but
you just mentioned it, so we might as well. But I think that trend of vacating the city that we saw in 2020, 2021 for more space, for more outdoors, I wouldn't be surprised if that does a 180 shift in 2023 and 2024.
A minor trend backwards.
Yeah, I mean, like, one of the things that saw the least amount of appreciation in those 2 years after COVID was downtown condos.
Downtown condos, yeah.
Right?
Downtown condos.
Pre-COVID, a 2-bedroom condo was $900,000. Today, a 2-bedroom condo is $900,000, roughly the same. Okay, let's go a little farther east to Chilliwack. Daniel Dulowski out there. He started our conversation with an example. He sold, and this sale had some news headlines as well, being a renovated single-family home in Chilliwack on a 8,000 to 9,000 square foot lot. It sold for 1.4 in February. And he said, if that exact house comes back today, it's probably 1.2, potentially 1.15. So that's a 15 to 20% difference in single family just on that one example. So his overall estimate was single families dropped roughly 10%, but where they're feeling a really big slowdown is land. So he was saying in the last few years, there's been a ton of developer activity in Chilliwack, buying larger parcels of land, subdivisions, trying to get more density into townhouses. And he said that land value, he's estimating down 20 to 25% from peak pricing of, let's say February. Condos, he said condos and townhouses actually have kind of held their own in the last couple months. There is a lot more inventory, but the sales prices haven't seen as significant a drop as single family, maybe in the 5% range. But that seller, the list price strategy has changed dramatically, and in similar to Langley, similar to the Lower Mainland, that instead of listing, slightly below market value, getting multiple offers, it's now listing at or above at or above market value, which is pushing sales prices below. And then same thing for demographic. He said they saw a huge influx of people moving from more expensive markets, moving east for more space, and that has almost dried up. He's like, it's mostly locals that are moving laterally or upsizing is their kind of demographic at the moment.
Any comment on the floods out there from him? I mean, that may affect some land value, but I've probably forgotten now.
Totally, because that was last summer.
Yeah. Or it was not long ago, but I can't remember.
November. I think that was November. Yeah. No, we didn't actually chat about that, but I would assume no, because
a lot of the homes are in the hills.
December, January, February were huge, crazy.
Yeah.
And that was kind of.
Who else did you talk to?
Do you want to go to the island or the interior?
Well, I mean, I didn't talk to anyone. I just looked up stats. Yeah, I'll go into the island in a bit, but.
Okay. Well, let's leave the island for last because you got lots of stats. Let's quickly talk about Kelowna. So Jared Frankzak was our contact over there. This is the neighborhood that, after chatting with him, seems like it's been affected the least. Kelowna is, his kind of opening comments were, Kelowna is such a desirable place to live. Every year, there's more and more people that are moving from more expensive markets, whether it be the Lower Mainland, Alberta, whatever it is, into Kelowna. He doesn't really see that slowing down much long term, if anything. He just thinks it'll be more and more desirable as the city continues to grow. Where he's seeing the biggest slowdown is single family over $1 million. So he said, condos, strata under 600, still very active. A lot of them are getting multiple offers and selling above list price. Single family under $1 million is still very active, often getting multiple offers. But what has really slowed down is single family over $1 million. He said overall prices have kind of plateaued. He hasn't really seen much of a drop yet. Potentially this new 0.5% increase today might continue to slow that. And I think, like we kind of mentioned earlier, I think Kelowna is one of those markets that does exceptionally well when Greater Vancouver is doing really well. A lot of people cash out here and move to the interior. So that potentially they are a little bit of a lag period behind Greater Vancouver. But as of now, prices have kind of plateaued, but kind of holding their own on a lot of product, except the single family over $1 million.
I should share my Okanagan real estate story.
You should.
So I had an investment home up at Predator Ridge in the Okanagan, and right after COVID hit, we sold it because it was just too much work, hassle, didn't feel right having it, and we had a good run up there. And we sold it for $1.07 million, and I think it was like 30 or 40 days on market to get there. That was May 2020, and I built April, May 2020. 2 years later, we're up at Sparkling Hills that last month, and drive by that home and see a sold sign. So 2 years later, we sold it for $1.71 million. We bought it for $900,000 4 or 5 years prior. The people that we bought it from paid like $800,000 for it, call it 15 years ago or 10 years ago. And this party that bought it for $1.70 million, 2 years later sold it for $2.225 million. They more than doubled it. we were on the butt end of a flip. But I mean, it stings a little, but they did a beautiful job. They actually did invest some money into it, but I was just floored. I was floored that home got $2.225 million. It was a 1.15 gain in 24 months. Wow.
Yeah, it almost doesn't even make sense. Like,
yeah, stings.
225 up there. That's such a big number.
I think they put 300 or 400 into it, but still, that accounted for. It wasn't ugly when we sold it. They made something that looked good, really good, and clearly the market loved it. Anyway, that was just something to share. I don't know if we'd get that price today, but it got that price last month.
Did you do any research on, like, was that a one-off sale? Has there been other big sales in that area?
I would say there have been a few others. That might be a one-off sale for that age of home and that size of home, but there are some higher-end homes there. I think the higher-end market, the biggest thing is 2 years ago or 2 to 10 years ago, the high-end market there was just quiet. Totally. Nothing was selling over $2 million. And now there's a number of sales there. So I think it's just that trend you're talking about, people cashing out of more expensive markets, going to the less expensive markets. But Predator Ridge is drawing a wealthy buyer that wants a really nice home.
Interesting. Okay, we're going to move to Penticton, Oliver, Summerland, OK Falls kind of area. Graham, I pronounce his last name wrong all the time, Veach. Graham Veach. Pretty similar story to the island, pretty similar story to Chilliwack, is that a lot of their market is determined by Greater Vancouver, people moving out of more expensive areas, retiring into the interior. It is such a beautiful place to live, and that is where a lot of people spend their retirement years. The first thing he said is he kind of laughed and he said, well, actually yesterday I just booked a buyer tour of 10 single family homes. So right there, inventory is up. Things are not selling as quickly as they were a couple months ago. With more inventory, he was mentioning that a lot of agents now are not even posting dates for offers. So he was the only one that kind of mentioned that, but I think that is kind of becoming more and more common. Is in late 2020 and 2021, it was pretty common for people to have a offer date posted a week after listing, doing open houses on the weekend. And that's kind of, it's not really the thing anymore. We are seeing a lot of agents just looking at offers as they come, mostly because a lot of sellers are pricing at or above market value and hoping for the best. And if you find an anxious buyer day one, you might as well deal with them rather than waiting a week.
Yeah, you don't want that offer date to fail and everyone's pointing at you saying, oh, you're overpriced. Time to negotiate.
It happens, I know. That's pretty much it. He said they haven't really seen a significantly notable drop in list prices, but he said he wouldn't be surprised if that happens through the summer because they're just kind of starting to feel that inventory build up and the slowdown happen.
Cool. Shall we go to the island?
We shall go to the island.
You had a contact over there. Who?
I got a couple of people. I talked to Ray Little in the Cowichan Valley, and he said overall single family is still pretty active. The list price strategy, like a lot of areas in BC, has changed to listing at around market value. Seller expectations, he said, they're hit and miss. He said there are still lots of sellers out there that think their home is going to get 25 offers because their neighbor did 2 months ago. And so he said sometimes the expectations are unrealistic, and that's where they're seeing homes sitting on market longer, where expectations are kind of in check with current market conditions. He said the sales are still happening very quickly, and a lot of them are still selling in a week. Just they're not getting that crazy bidding war and selling $200K over asking like they were 2 or 3 months ago. Condos and townhouses were very active, he said. They haven't really seen much of a slowdown. Prices haven't come down, and potentially they are kind of in that same boat as Penticton, that they're maybe just starting to feel the slowdown, and potentially the summer will be a little bit different than the last couple months. But I think just for affordability reasons, their condos and townhouses have kind of held their own the last 60 days. Demographic, that area is very similar to the Okanagan in that it gets a lot of people moving from more expensive neighborhoods like Greater Vancouver, like Alberta, like Ontario. A lot of people have moved over to the island from Ontario this last 2 years. So I would assume as Ontario, like the expensive areas in Ontario slow, the expensive areas in Greater Vancouver slow, I would assume that a neighborhood like the Cowichan Valley would start to feel that over the summer as well.
Yeah, the island's got a lot to offer because it has so many different price points. And when you look at Victoria, it is an expensive market. Victoria gets a lot of attention from, maybe not everyone's paying attention to Victoria, but from around the West Coast and further away in a way. I know a friend of mine works down in Seattle, and down in Seattle, they think very highly of Victoria for the people that know it and like going there. I think there's a scenario when you look over a real long-term horizon, there is a scenario where Victoria could be as, if not potentially even more expensive than a lot of the most expensive parts of Vancouver. Maybe not Point Great Road, for example, but it's got the best climate in Canada. It's surrounded by water, and it is a little bit landlocked when you look at, say, Oak Bay and the downtown core. And I don't see it getting less desirable. And the trend I see is that people that were in maybe Victoria for more affordable reasons, the prices have got so expensive that they tend to migrate up island as well. So, Cowichan Valley, Nanaimo, Parksville, Comox Valley, they get kind of, when Vancouver gets expensive, people flow to those markets. And then when Victoria gets expensive, there is a flow that goes up island as well.
For sure.
Yeah. Hence like Langford too. That's not up island, but that's a real growing market too.
For sure. And then the other guy I talked to on the island was Jordan Becker, Nanaimo. Single family in Nanaimo, he said inventory is about 3 times what it was 3 months ago. So naturally, days on market kind of builds up a little bit as inventory grows. But he said the average days on market January, February, March was 5, and now they're seeing about 15. So he said single family is still very active. They're still seeing places sell very quickly. He said maybe in the last 30 to 60 days, they've seen a really small drop in prices. He mentioned maybe 2 to 3%, but they've kind of held their own. Again, like most markets, list price strategy for a lot of sellers has changed from listing on the low end to get multiple offers to listing at market value or slightly higher. And then condos and townhouses was kind of a similar story to Cowichan Valley in that they had such little inventory for the beginning part of the year that prices and sales volume has just kind of like stayed steady through the last couple months. So there's more inventory now, a little bit more to choose from, but early in the year, there was just so little that inventory is just trying to catch up to demand at the moment. Average days on market for condos, townhouses, about 10.
What I looked at this morning prior to coming here was just kind of sales. So just what's selling. Unfortunately, I don't have as much data on stats on the island, but I can see the sales. And I like looking at the last 30 days because it tells me a picture of what's going on right now. So one area that I looked at was Langford. Gets a lot of attention, growing suburb of Victoria. And when I looked at the last 40 days, the trend that I saw, well, one, it still is a seller's market. When you look at what's selling, I can't speak on what's being listed, but about 50 to 60% of the sales in the last 30 days were full price or above. There are a lot of bidding wars, a lot of full price, a lot of quick sales. And I get it because, one example was, what do you get for $1.2 million in Langford? You get a 2,500 square foot, 10-year-old home. And that's a pretty good value. And that 50% sort of full price or above list price sale was pretty, I looked at Parksville, that was pretty common up there as well. So, and the other market that I look at that I love, I don't spend enough time there, but I think it's an absolute paradise, is Comox Valley. And Comox Valley is a big geographic area, but I've had my friends on the island seem to love it. I've known people that have moved up there. I know people that want to move out that way. And I see why. You can still get a house under $800K, and 1.2 gets you a nice home. But when you look at the last 30 days of Comox Valley sales, 70% of them were getting full price or above list, approximately. So there are markets where, yeah, like you mentioned, the inventory is much higher than it was 3 months ago, but it's just catching up to demand. I could see it pulling back or quieting a little, but I think a good house that accommodates a family may be unaffected or may have minimal impact from the rates. Land value on the island, I sure will be impacted because there is already a lot of land over there. And the only other comment I'd make is in these markets like Parksville or Comox Valley, there's a big difference between a waterfront home and an inland home. So the data is a little bit all over the place. The median home in Parksville, well, it's hard you have waterfront homes for $3 million, and then you have houses that are $700,000 a few blocks in. So it's those are unique markets, but they seem very strong right now.
Do you see them just in the midst of the lag period behind Greater Vancouver? Because it seems like a lot of those neighborhoods that saw a ton of growth on the island in the last 2 years were directly affected by people downsizing or, downsizing in price point from Greater Vancouver moving over to the island.
Sorry, what is your question?
Do you think we're just going to start seeing the slowdown there now? Like 70% of sales above list price is higher than I anticipated. Those are February, March numbers in Greater Vancouver. And do you think they're just a few months behind because they saw a lot of those buyers in the last 2 months were people that have sold in Greater Vancouver and moving over there? Because that was a big trend in the last 2 years.
Yeah, well, I guess here's the argument that might hold the island. When you look at the island, it gets the empty nesters, the older retirees that are drawn to a nice waterfront home or a nice home with a view. And will that, I guess in short, I do think it's lagging. I do think there would be some sort of slowdown coming. If everywhere else is slowing, there's no reason why that should get more busier, but there is some arguments where it may hold because they are small communities that don't have, by the numbers, as many homes as, say, like even Burnaby is probably more homes than Nanaimo to Campbell River, for example. So, the empty nesters flock into the island for the luxury home. That could ease up a bit. But a lot of, call it the townhouse, the typical 3-bedroom plus entry-level homes or $1.2 million homes, a lot of that market is, driven by development. And there's so much building going on, call it north of Nanaimo, where there's demand going to this. So there's a lot of construction. Those construction trades need homes to live in. And I think there's the demand outweighs the supply. And I think one thing that we got to acknowledge here is that rents are climbing in this environment. So when rents are high, because rents are high in these markets compared to the sale prices, and when you increase interest rates and you cause the market to slow, this is an environment where rents might go on a tear over the next 6 to 12 months. So I anticipate some sort of slowdown, but I wouldn't be surprised if, a market like Comox Valley just doesn't slow down if you isolate a typical family home. But I don't know. I'm not an expert out there. I'm just a fan that watches from afar.
I think that's it. We, overall, BC slowing in general, but there are markets that are just kind of holding their own, like some very, very desirable places on the island, and sounds like Kelowna as well.
There's future scenarios where if another bank hike rate happens, we could see disaster and slowdown. There's a scenario where if we get a lot of immigration coming in and say the rates stay stable.
Yeah.
I mean, next year, who knows what's going to happen next year? But it's slowing down, but it's still a seller's market in a lot of these places. It's just that they saw lucky prices a couple months ago, and it's hard to repeat some of those prices. Yeah. All right. That's it.